I confessed I'd stepped off our honeymoon bed with another man and told no one the truth, yet people assume a simple fling. I admit a betrayal that broke a promise he made with a ring, and now his family calls me poison, my job asks questions, and my mother won't take my calls. The world thinks I'm calculating, heartless, maybe even a criminal who destroyed an honest guy. I promised to lay it all out. The night I broke, the text I should have sent, the moment I chose a stranger's words over my vows, and to admit the one thing that changes how you will judge this story. I will confess the detail that will make you rethink my whole life. I brought a box of travel journals to our honeymoon suite and told myself I'd keep memories in ink instead of anxiety. I had been carrying a suitcase of nerves since the day Elias proposed, afraid I would disappoint him with my silence in the quiet spaces between his certainty. I was raised to be agreeable, to make rooms feel safe, but marriage felt like stepping into a spotlight that would judge my shadow. Our suite had whitewashed walls, blue shutters, and a view of blue rooftops that glowed at dusk. I loved the idea of waking up to sea air and fresh figs, of making up stories about our future. The first morning we walked past the taverna, and he smiled at me while the church bells rang. My throat tightened like a knot being pulled too tight. I hid it behind coffee foam. He saw the foam, not the knot. On our first night, the terrace lit up with fairy lights, and the sea breathed like a metronome. Elias told me he'd booked a sunset sail. I told him I wanted to rest a little first. He kissed my forehead and left me alone with the soft wind and my thoughts. I scrolled through messages, replying to work threads like a reflex. Then a message from Luca buzzed on my phone. He was a photographer I barely knew, the one who'd shot my client's campaign months earlier. He was in Crete, too. He wrote something casual. Did I want to walk the harbor after midnight? I didn't think. I typed a reply I never read out loud to Elias maybe. I stood up and closed the shutters, because I thought it would be better if the room stayed dark while I did a dumb thing I didn't understand. He wrote that he'd wait by the stone arch at the end of the lane. I grabbed my shoes and told myself this was a walk. I walked. He was there, laughing in a way I liked, and we turned into a bar with low ceilings and a band we didn't care about. I drank something bitter with lemon, and he said my name in a way that didn't sound like he'd known me long. We slid onto the back row, where the light was thin and the conversation was easy. He leaned closer when the song changed and asked if I was okay. I said I was fine. I was fine when I told him that I loved my husband and that the marriage felt new, like a shirt with tags still on. He nodded and said maybe people wear their tags a while before they cut them off. He asked if the sea bothered me. I told him the sea made me think about drowning in my own head. He said that was a metaphor and asked if I wanted to come to his place to see an old camera. I laughed like he was joking. He told me he was. He asked again, his eyes steady. My thumb brushed the edge of my phone, where a text from Elias waited, "Can't wait to see you at dawn." I said yes. I told myself I just needed to not go to the camera. I just wanted to sit somewhere and breathe. The door to his room opened and closed. He turned on a lamp and showed me a camera with cracked leather. I ran my finger over it and he said I had careful hands. He kissed me. I froze. He pulled back and said I could leave. I stood there, my heart jumping like it had a life separate from me. I kissed him back. I pressed my mouth against his like I wanted to erase something. By morning I was back, pretending I'd slept. He didn't text. I told myself it was nothing. My phone pinged with a message from my mother asking how Crete looked. I took a picture of the fig tree outside the window and sent it to her. She replied with hearts. Elias came in with a small bag of pastries and kissed my cheek, his breath warm. I smelled bread and coffee and thought about his hands. He asked if I felt better. I nodded. He asked if he could hold me. I let him, and his arms were the shape of home that I had wanted. I didn't tell him about the other man. I didn't tell him about the camera. Elias said his aunt might call, which meant someone might read her tone differently than I did. He joked about his cousin's drama at the table, a laugh that landed soft. I smiled. I thought we were normal. Then his phone buzzed and his face changed. He slid it to me. The text was from Luca. "Nice to see you last night. Don't tell your husband." I put the phone back down. He asked me what it meant. I said it was nonsense. He asked me if I'd walked with someone. I said I'd walked. I said he was a photographer. I said we had talked. He asked me if we kissed. I said I didn't know. He raised his eyebrows like he was trying to set the pieces together while I knocked them apart. He asked me if anything else happened. I looked at the ceiling. He said my silence was answering the question. He asked if I'd lied. I said no, but I hadn't told. He asked if I'd cheated. I said I didn't know what that word meant in this context. He sat down on the bed. He said his cousins had asked him the same question in a different context at a family dinner 2 weeks earlier. I'd laughed and said they were paranoid. I had thought I was good at managing truth by keeping it tidy. He looked at me like he was measuring how much of me was left. He said his mother would say this is a test God put in front of us. I said I didn't think God planned this. He said it didn't matter. He said if I'd kissed him, if I'd been in his room, then I'd broken something that belonged to both of us. I wanted to protest. I wanted to say it was just a kiss. But the room had that sound again, like the sea breathing. I stood up. I walked past the fig tree. I came back and told him the truth. I'd gone into Luca's room and kissed him. I told him nothing else happened. He stared at me. He asked if I was lying to protect something else. I said no. I was lying anyway. After the hotel manager handed us our keycards for an extension we didn't want, Elias asked if I thought we could pretend. I said I thought pretend was a skill. He said lying is a skill, but pretending is pretending. He asked if I'd go to a bar and tell a stranger I was a saint. I said no, I'd tell them I made a mistake. He said mistakes have edges. He told me he needed space, and when he said space, he looked at the sea like it could hold it. He canceled the afternoon sale. He called a lawyer. He called his mother. He told me he didn't want to be married to someone he couldn't trust. He told me we'd need to undo what we'd done. He said the word annulment like it meant the story could be erased. He held his hand up in a gesture that meant we should stop the conversation like a child stops a game when it's gotten too dangerous. I thought this was too dramatic. I thought he was being romantic about vows like he liked romancing them. I said we could take a break and come back to the subject when we could breathe. He said we'd never breathe if I didn't tell him why I did it. I told him I was scared I was too quiet. He said that's not a reason to go to someone else's bed. I said I didn't go to bed. He said I kissed someone else because I felt something in myself and made him feel something out of me. He sent me the lawyer's number and said the next call should be mine. He asked me to leave the hotel for an hour. I went to the harbor and sat on a stone bench while the wind felt like a cold brush against my cheeks. I did not want to face the sun. I wanted to hide behind sunglasses and be nobody. I wanted to become a person whose mistakes were small and private. I sent him a text, I'm coming back to this. He replied with 3 dots and then nothing. I wrote a message to my mother, telling her that we were having a fight. She said, don't let him sulk. Men sulk when they want to win. I erased it. I wrote to my friend Nina I did something stupid. She replied, don't be a drama queen. I wrote back, he may leave me. She sent a heart. I came back to the suite and Elias was gone. His suitcase was gone, his passport. His little book where he wrote down what we had seen and when. The fig tree and the terrace stayed. The sea stayed. I called his phone. It went to voicemail. I called his mother. She didn't answer. I called his aunt. She said he had gone to another hotel. I asked her why. She said because a man needs to breathe. I cried on the couch until my face felt like a mess. Later that night, I met Luca at the harbor because I thought that talking to him might make the story feel different. He saw my eyes and asked if I wanted to talk. I told him what Elias had done. He said that's heavy. He told me he hadn't expected to blow up someone's marriage. He said he was sorry. He said he'd stop messaging me. He said he had feelings, but feelings weren't proof of anything good. He asked me if I loved my husband. I said I did, but he seemed to love the idea of me more than the version of me that lived in my head. He said that's normal, people love ideas, but they survive because they know them. I told him I was afraid I'd disappear into the idea of myself and become a picture he didn't want. He asked if I wanted me to call my husband. I said no. He told me to call my own heart and listen. I went back to the room. I stood at the window and didn't watch the sea. I wrote a confession in my journal and I tore the page out and I wanted to throw it into the water. I wanted to send it to Elias. I wanted to go to the terrace and scream. I wanted to call my boss and say I wasn't sure I'd be in the office the next week. I wanted to be a woman whose mistakes were small and private and didn't have consequences. The next morning, I called the lawyer. The lawyer's voice was crisp, like something cut with a blade. She told me an annulment was a legal way to erase a marriage from the public record, especially if one party claims a violation of intent. I said I wasn't claiming anything. She said he had already sent a letter stating that I had committed a significant deception during the honeymoon. She asked me what that deception was. I didn't tell her about the camera. I told her I had kissed someone else. She said deception plus sexual intimacy could be interpreted as more than a kiss. She said that in Crete the law tends to see intention as evidence. I asked what she meant. She said men and women make promises, and if one breaks them, the law asks why. She asked me if I'd paid for a hotel room. I said I hadn't. She asked if I'd paid for an Uber. I said yes. She said that means there was a transaction and a purpose. I told her I didn't understand why the money mattered. She said it mattered because it gave context. She said I had the option to contest the annulment. I asked what would happen if I contested. She said it would become a story, and people love stories like this. She said my story would be judged, but that it could also be explained. She said if I wanted to tell the truth, I had to tell all of it. I asked what all meant. She said who, when, why, where, and what. I told her I'd think. I called Nina and told her I might have to contest my marriage being erased. She said that sounded like a terrible idea. She said that when men ask you to go away, you go away. She said my husband was trying to protect his family name. She said men sometimes make themselves look like saints to do it. I told her I thought he was good. She said he was trying to be. I thought about his hand on my shoulder in the hotel lobby. I thought about him telling me we'd be okay. I thought about his eyes when he asked me if I'd kissed Luca. I thought about the way he looked at my face like he was trying to find a place where the lie had roots. He didn't call. I called his mother. She said he was angry because he'd wanted to build something with me that honored his parents and our friends and his cousins' stories. I said I wanted that too. She said that words do not build, actions do. She said my action was a blade that split his world. She asked me why I did it. I told her I was scared. She said she was scared when her husband left for a trip when she was pregnant. She said she'd never gone to a bar with a stranger. I said that was brave. She said that was respect. He never called again. I got a letter from a notary confirming the annulment had been accepted. I got a message from a woman at the agency where I worked who asked me if I needed to cancel my account there. I asked her what she meant. She said sometimes people stop working after something like this because it hurts their reputation. I said I didn't stop working. She said maybe they would ask me to stop. I didn't stop. I went to the office. People glanced at me like I was a piece of gossip. Someone asked me if I was okay. I said yes. Someone asked me if it was true. I said parts of it were. Someone asked me if I'd done it because I was bored. I said no. Someone asked me if I'd kept my wedding ring. I said yes, then I took it off and put it in my drawer. I locked the drawer. I didn't throw it in the trash. Elias's cousin posted something on social media without tagging me. He wrote that the true sign of respect in a marriage is telling the truth even when it hurts. People liked it. Someone replied with a heart. Someone said that was a powerful message. I stared at my phone and did not reply. My mother called me and said she was disappointed. She said she raised me to be a loyal woman. I said I loved him and I made a choice that wasn't loyal. She said that meant I didn't love him enough. I said I thought that was not fair. She said fairness wasn't her style. I called my therapist because I thought the only way to make this better was to understand my brain. The therapist said I might have a fear of intimacy or an impulse to sabotage, or both. He said people who love safety sometimes burn it down to see if they can survive the fire. I told him I didn't want to be a person who burns things. He asked if I was burning something else right now. I told him I was destroying my image with Elia's family. He said people in families like his protect one another by destroying people who don't belong to their myth. He said sometimes the myth needs a villain. He said if you didn't fit the myth, you became the villain. I told him I wanted to belong. He asked what belonging meant to me. I said it meant someone would choose me even when I wasn't perfect. He said that meant I wanted unconditional love. He said that might not exist in this family, but it might exist in me if I let myself love myself. I wrote an email to Elias and I didn't send it. In it, I told him everything. I told him about the night with Luca, about the kiss, about the camera, about my fear of disappearing into his image of me. I told him I'd taken his ring off and that I hadn't thrown it away because throwing felt too final. I told him I was sorry and that sorry meant more than I'd known. I told him I understood why he was gone. I told him I didn't understand why he'd chosen the annulment so fast, like we could delete a part of ourselves without bleeding. I told him to call me if he wanted to try again. I didn't send it. I didn't know how to be honest without sounding like a victim. I didn't know how to be honest without sounding like a liar. At work, a client asked me if I had a personal branding strategy. I said I didn't. They said good. They said clean. They said people want clean. I went home to my apartment and looked at the white walls. I thought about the whitewashed hotel. I thought about the fig tree. I called my mother again. I told her I had done the wrong thing and now I was alone and I wanted her to tell me she loved me anyway. She said she did. She said I had betrayed him. She said she wouldn't pretend the betrayal didn't happen. She said she loved me because she had to, not because I deserved it. I hung up and sat on my couch and cried until the tears dried. On a Thursday, a woman I didn't recognize called me. She said she'd been Luca's ex-girlfriend and that she saw the story and she wanted me to know that Luca had a pattern of getting close to women who looked like his mother, and that I looked like his mother. I told her I was not interested. She said she wanted me to know because it might change how I saw myself. I told her I didn't want to see myself differently at all. She said truth changes you anyway. She said she'd heard through someone that Elias was telling people I had slept with Luca and not just kissed him. I told her that wasn't true. She said yes, it is. She said men say things that make themselves feel good. I told her Elias wouldn't lie. She said he was lying to survive. I hung up. I realized I was alone. I realized I'd chosen something that made me alone. I realized I could choose something else. I sent the email. I sent it to Elias' address. I attached the torn page from the journal. I said I wanted to be honest now and that I wanted to ask him to hear the last part of the story. I wrote, please call me. I didn't expect him to call. He didn't. He didn't call the next day either. He didn't reply. I called his mother again. She said he wasn't talking to anyone. She said he was working and he was trying to get his head straight. I asked her if I should send the annulment papers. She said I should not. She said I should stop. I said I didn't want to stop. She said I should stop because it's exhausting to fight someone who doesn't want to fight. I hung up. I took a walk by the water. I took a breath. I felt like someone who finally saw the truth and didn't want to admit it. The truth was that I'd wanted the night with Luca more than I'd wanted Elias. I'd wanted his words, his face, his closeness, and that had been the reason I went into his room. I wanted to be wanted by someone I barely knew because I thought that was a sign I wasn't a picture. It was proof I was a person with needs. But proof is evidence, and evidence can be used against you. I went to the agency and asked my boss if I should step down from my next campaign. He said I could, or I could work on something smaller. I asked if small meant safe. He said it meant no pressure. I said I wanted pressure. He said he didn't. I told him I was going to go home and work alone. He said that's okay, but I couldn't hide from this forever. I said I wasn't hiding. He said it looked like hiding. I thought about hiding. I thought about the fig tree again, how it had been a quiet thing that stood while we shouted. That night, I made a call I didn't want to make. I called Luca. He said he'd heard about the annulment. He said he was sorry. I told him I needed to tell him something because otherwise I was lying about his role. He said, tell me. I told him about how I'd gone to his room because I wanted him to kiss me, because I wanted to feel chosen by someone who didn't know all my stories. He said he didn't know all my stories. He said he'd wanted to kiss me because he was hurt too. He said I looked like a woman who could make him feel good again. He said he knew that was selfish. He said he should not have asked me if I was okay. He said he should not have taken the risk. He said he knew the risk when he asked me to come. I told him I should not have said yes. He told me that was good. He told me it was honest. He told me he was leaving Crete. I told him to go. I told him I didn't want to see him again. He said that's good for you. He asked me if I felt any relief. I told him I felt nothing. I didn't know if I was lying. I didn't know if it mattered if I was lying. I went to bed and dreamed about the church bells. I woke up in the middle of the night and stood up and walked to the window. I looked at the street, and the street looked like it was full of strangers. I thought about the night I'd stood in Luca's room and kissed him and thought I was erasing the fear. I thought about how fear doesn't get erased by actions, it gets turned into a new shape that hides in different corners. I thought about Elias' face when I told him I'd kissed Luca. I thought about how his eyes changed. I thought about how his love for me was not enough to change that. I thought about what I'd wanted from him, which was proof that I wasn't boring, proof that I was dangerous. I thought about how I'd gotten that proof, and now I was the only one in danger. The next week, I asked my friend Nina to come to my apartment. She came, and she brought coffee, and she asked me what I wanted. I told her I wanted to feel less alone. She said that was simple. I told her I wanted to be kind to myself. She said that was harder. She asked me if I was going to call my mother more. I said no. She asked me if I was going to keep wearing the ring on the drawer. I said yes. She asked me if I wanted me to find you. I said no. She asked me if I wanted me to delete the photos of the trip. I said no. She said you might need to decide what you're keeping and what you're giving away. I told her I couldn't decide. She said decide later. I told her I didn't know if there was a later. She said there is always a later because you breathe. I went to the notary to change my address. I told him I had moved. He asked if I needed help. I said no. He asked if I was okay. I said no. I told him my marriage had been annulled. He said I was sorry. He asked if I wanted to fill out a form that cleared a mistake from my record. I told him it wasn't a mistake. He said that's how annulment works. He said the law forgets it like it never happened. He said the law is sometimes kind. I told him I wanted to remember. He said that's normal. He gave me his pen and asked if I wanted to write anything else. I wrote not forgetting. I called my boss and told him I could do the campaign if I needed to. He said we could change the campaign to make it about loss. He asked me if I could hold that idea. I told him I could. He asked if I wanted me to read me what we would say. I told him yes. He said we love to show the real. We show pain and the pain becomes a place where love learns to be. He asked me if that sounded right. I told him I didn't think pain was a place. He asked me if I wanted to change it. I said no. He said do it. I watched the campaign and read the copy. It felt like watching someone else's life. It felt like watching my life. People commented. Someone said I was brave. Someone said I was fake. Someone said I was telling the truth. Someone said I was hiding. I posted nothing. I watched. I felt the weight of the story as it moved around me and I didn't want to hold it. I wanted to set it down. I set my phone on the desk and went to the kitchen and poured water into a glass. I drank it. I looked at my hands and saw I was holding them too tightly. I loosened them. I thought about Elias again. I thought about the way he used to say my name like he knew what to do with me. I thought about how I had taken that name and turned it into a question. On a morning that felt like all mornings, I woke up and felt a quiet I didn't expect. I made coffee. I sat at my table. I looked at the drawer. I opened it and took out the ring. I put it in my pocket. I walked outside and I felt the air on my face. I went to the water and I said I wanted to be okay. I said I wanted to be honest even when it hurt. I said I wanted to forgive myself without pretending I hadn't done what I did. I didn't promise anything to Elias. I didn't promise anything to my mother. I promised something to me. I walked back to my apartment and I took out the torn page from the journal. I read it and I saw how small it had been and how much it had held. I read the words like they were a body. I felt the breath come and go. I put the ring back in the drawer and closed it. I locked it. I kept the key. I didn't throw it away. I didn't throw it away because I didn't need to throw it away to remember what I had learned. This story comes out now because I watched the campaign I'd filmed get posted, and I saw the words we love to show the real, and I realized I had not shown the real in the months that mattered most. I confess that I stepped out of our honeymoon bed into Luca's arms and didn't tell my husband until a lie grew into a truth he didn't want. I admit that I kissed him because I wanted to feel chosen, not because I was drunk or lonely in a foreign place, and that when Elias asked me what I'd done, I said I didn't know, which was the worst lie. I tell you now the part that changes the story. I sent Elias a detailed email with the truth, and when he did not reply, I kept it to myself, and then I turned into a woman who thought silence could save her. I learned that honesty doesn't erase what happened, but it changes the way it sits inside me. Elias vanished because he needed to vanish, and I didn't have the right to stop him, but I had the duty to say what I should have said the night I came back to our room. This ends with no neat resolution and a question when you say sorry. Does it belong to the person you hurt, or does it belong to you?